Story 1. Knowing that you do not know everything while others repeat nonsense from the rafters and think they are right. Story 2. Learning late how to struggle. The longer you can just skate through on your natural ability to absorb and process information, the more crushing the inevitable moment when you encounter something you have to work to do or understand. Story 3. You see how much nonsense is actually going on everywhere and cannot escape into blissful ignorance. Story 4. The thing that affected me was that I never learned to study. I absorbed lessons and facts so easily that I was never challenged, which was great at the time. But then I got to college and it overwhelmed me. I couldn't keep up. Everything was hard. I was frustrated with myself for not just getting it like I used to. Since I had no study habits, I wasn't able to work through it like other people were. Add in alcohol, relationships, and depression, and I barely managed to get by. It took me a decade to recover, and by then I had squandered most of my opportunities. Story 5. Growing up, my intelligence was something that people unintentionally used to other me. For context, I moved around a lot and essentially skipped kindergarten and fourth grades. So my family would move, or I would go to a new school, for example, from middle school to high school, and all the parents and kids could instantly tell I was young. They would ask the obvious question, "How old are you?" Their reply to the answer was always some variation of, "Oh, you must be really smart then." When I inevitably acted my age, made a social faux pas, had to bum rides from friends far later than normal in high school, or in college couldn't go to the bars, it was tied to my intelligence. Plus, the added challenge of every single bully instinctively picking the kid 2 years younger as their favorite target. 20 years of that subtle and not so subtle reinforcement affected me in many ways, but therapy exists and has helped. I definitely recommend against letting kids skip more than one grade, as it causes many negative social impacts. Story 6. You cannot take comfort in beliefs unsupported by evidence. You have to face reality as a fact, which is often uncomfortable. Story 7. You struggle to have meaningful conversations because what seems basic to you is unfamiliar to most people. They often cannot distinguish between fact and feeling, or separate their own thoughts from what they have absorbed through television and media. If you disagree with them, they take it as a personal attack. Story 8. Things have a larger impact on you. You feel much better from the kindness of others, but it also affects you deeply when you see the negative side of people. Story 9. In the movie broadcast news, Holly Hunter is a reporter and the most knowledgeable person in offices and meetings full of smart people. At a crucial point in the film, when management is focused on finding the best way to handle the current crisis, a decision is made with which Holly Hunter disagrees openly. The head of the network confronts her and says, "It must be nice to always believe you know better, to always think you are the smartest person in the room." She replies, "No, it is awful." Story 10. Biting your tongue all the time to stop correcting people can become annoying, and no one wants to be around a know-it-all. Story 11. Being put in the spotlight. Everyone expects you to know everything. They rely on you to fix an issue, and when you cannot or get it wrong, everyone criticizes you more than they would an average person. Story 12. People get upset at you for analyzing a situation, correctly predicting the outcome, and then becoming even more upset that you were right. This happens to me all the time. I also have people tell me things like, "You are a know-it-all and have to be right," and get angry because I am right. Another thing I have noticed is people opposing a valid point I make, insisting I am wrong, and then when I turn out to be right, they claim to have agreed with me the entire time. I have had to record people disagreeing with me and play it back to prove they did not agree. It is mind-boggling. Story 13. Self-doubt. Other people are just so carefree and confident, while you are painfully aware of what you do not know, what can go wrong, and so on. Story 14. People enjoy having long conversations about life or how the world works, even if they do not know much. However, you may be considered a killjoy for explaining the reality. Story 15. It takes a level of intelligence to recognize and respect intelligence. Dull thinkers often consider their ignorance to be as good as my knowledge. Story 16. One I haven't seen yet is the idea that because your brain is unique, you somehow owe its use to everyone not similarly gifted. I knew by the time I was 16 that I did not want to practice medicine because the first time I accidentally killed someone would destroy me. Like every other person on the planet, I would make a mistake at some point. It did not matter when I tried to explain this because people said, "You are so smart, you should be a doctor." Story 17. I was told by my supervisor to stop answering questions in group meetings at work because he knows that I know the answer, as if I was trying to earn points or show off. No, someone asked because they did not know the answer, so I provided it. Now, I wait until no one else answers, let the situation become uncomfortable, and then I respond. Story 18. The social disorders that come with intelligence include the inability to blend in with society, sometimes leading to becoming a social outcast. Story 19. You are always on. Being on means you are constantly self-aware, so with each response and action, you analyze how people will perceive it. This causes stress when socializing, which explains why many intelligent people prefer to be alone. When you do go out, you often do not feel a genuine connection. Instead, it feels like playing a persona game where you are just maximizing social points. You always aim for the best answer and decision to be liked, at the cost of expressing what you truly want to say or do. Story 20. I am not sure if this qualifies, but I remember almost everything. This is great when playing trivia or taking a test, but it is horrible when you lie awake and remember every single mistake you made in your life and cannot stop thinking about how you could have done things differently. It is torture to see all those details clearly. Story 21. Literally the expectations. You are so smart you will go so far. Like, no, I do not want to. Let me be. Story 22. Here is a serious answer. Ultimately, you get used to being the smartest person in the room. One of three things happens. You subconsciously crave the presence of less smart people, limiting yourself. You rise to a situation where you are not the smartest person in the room, fail to recognize it, and everyone thinks you are arrogant. You become well-adjusted. Story 23. You see through all the nonsense and question why no one else notices what is happening. I am also referring to the current political landscape. It baffles me. Story 24. Depression. Being intelligent enough to know it is never enough can lead to reduced optimism. Happiness is difficult to achieve when time is spent contemplating challenges. Story 25. 1. You cannot turn it off. Being able to accurately predict events that are several steps or months ahead. Knowing others do not possess the mental acuity to see the whole picture, much less understand what you are telling them. Sometime later, those same people become angry at you for what they perceive as sorcery, or look at you astonished and confused when their plan backfires after you warn them, and now they want to understand your insight. Weak-willed, weak-minded, helpless, or otherwise low intelligence or emotional intelligence individuals want to rely on you for advice or to solve their problems. Having the ability to see right through drama as if it were not even there. Having the ability to see through manipulation as if it were not even there. Feeling frustrated at points 6 and 7 because nobody else can see the same. Consuming news of any variety and becoming frustrated for the same reasons named above. Story 26. I'm not a genius, but my family, except for my adult daughter, is quite dense, uneducated, and unworldly. I have to simplify myself a lot around them. It is frustrating because I love intellectual conversations and theory discussions. I am a huge science fiction enthusiast and I work in information technology. So, when I have to explain things to my family, I use very easy-to-follow metaphors. Story 27. You foresee all the bad things that are about to happen, and that kills all the joy in the excitement and anticipation that other people have. Story 28. I have no idea how to explain anything to anyone. I am smart enough to just understand most of the time when I am learning something new, so I do not know how to explain the things that I know. I do not know why things that are obvious to me are so difficult for other people to see. It may sound like a humble brag, but outside an academic setting, there is no prize for knowing things. The only value is in being able to apply and explain what you know. Story 29. You are very aware of your own mistakes, wishful thinking, and lack of knowledge, and that feels normal to you. That is your baseline. So you don't feel smart yourself, but almost everyone else feels incredibly unintelligent. as if the world is a giant group home for individuals with developmental disabilities. That is what the subjective experience of being very intelligent feels like. Story 30. People have the impression that being intelligent means being arrogant and using complicated words that others may not understand, making them feel inadequate. Story 31. My family comes to me with every question they have about literally anything, but they never believe me. They hear my answer, say no right to my face, and search it online. Oh, I guess you were right. Every single time. I just want to say I don't think I'm smart. I'm just well-read. I like to look things up and learn new things. Story 32. Imagine if a dog could speak and understand English. Now imagine how quickly the conversations would start to revolve around the same things repeatedly, and the dog gets angry when you try to explain why it cannot have infinite food or be outside whenever it wants. It does not seem to matter how you phrase or explain things. The dog simply does not have the capacity to understand. Now imagine living in a world where everyone you meet is like that. You cannot seem to make anyone care or understand things beyond eating, playing, and sleeping, or their equivalents in humans. Story 33. When school is easy early in life, we often fail to develop good study habits. Later in life, higher education and other activities that require studying can become overwhelming as we face learning challenges for the first time and struggle to adjust. Some of us never adjust and are accused of not living up to our potential. This often results in depression and low self-esteem, as in many cases, the only thing we are praised for, being smart, is called into question. Story 34. I don't know if I consider myself smart, but I have a lot of common sense and a high level of situational awareness. Our family has a joke about it. I point out something that is blatantly obvious to me that no one else sees, and my family teases me by saying, "Well, that's a stupid idea." My frustration is having to patiently explain to others things that seem very obvious to me. Story 35. People seeing you as boring. I found with my old friend group that they would get caught up so easily in social drama and make the worst assumptions about people based on nothing. The same goes for solutions. It turns out a lot of people prefer to have problems to complain about rather than be given a solution to them. Relationship issues are the worst. This is related to the solution thing. Complaining about partners without trying to understand them, then being shocked when I do not agree with their unreasonable perspective. For example, he is not being controlling. He is asking you to text him when you arrive so he knows you are safe. Story 36. Seeing behind the curtain. Knowing how messed up things are. Knowing how outnumbered you would be if you spoke up. Story 37. Getting bored easily. Moving through school without effort, leaving you with no study habits. Story 38. People keep expecting accomplishments and ambition from you and trying to hand you responsibility when all you want to do is get high and play video games. Story 39. The experience depends on the type of education you receive. Some people are luckier than others. Many intelligent individuals become bored at school, which can lead to disengagement or disruptive behavior. Story 40. You struggle to have meaningful conversations because what seems basic to you is unfamiliar to most people. They often cannot distinguish between fact and feeling or separate their own thoughts from what they have absorbed through television and media. If you disagree with them, they take it as a personal attack. Story 41. Getting overwhelmed with lots of information and suffering from analysis paralysis. We procrastinate a lot and regret it later. We are not as smart as we used to be in our childhood. People who think less act more. And we lag behind. Story 42. I have an intelligence quotient above 150, but I also have a neurological condition that prevents me from working long hours or maintaining mental clarity and attention for extended periods. It is the human brain equivalent of being a Ferrari stuck in heavy traffic with small windows of free road, and just when you start to pick up speed, more traffic appears. That, and truly finding people to connect with. Story 43. Sometimes when I help others, I feel like an adult trying to keep a circle of crawling infants from reaching a pit filled with flames. It is a constant job and very tiring, but I do it anyway because it is the right thing to do. I have the abilities I do for a reason, and I use them to save lives. It is not glamorous work, and I do not even get paid for it, but it is very important. Story 44. People think you are trying to manipulate or confuse them on purpose for malicious reasons. In my experience, this is especially true in romantic relationships. Story 45. Constantly having to choose between spending too much time educating people around you or just listening to them repeat foolish things. Story 46. What I notice the most, especially in math-related situations, is that people ask me questions, and if I get the answer right, it is expected because I am supposed to be good at math. Often, it ends with a comment like, "Okay, smarty pants." If I happen to be wrong, I hear, "I thought you were good at math." So, I usually get either a useless reply or a negative one. Rarely does my math bring out a compliment. Story 47. I think everyone knows it, but the huge downside is being surrounded by people who swear they know everything. Story 48. One downside of being smart that The Simpsons explores surprisingly well is isolation, how intelligence can create distance from others, especially if you are used to connection based on shared emotional or social experiences rather than intellectual ones. In the episode HOMR, Homer becomes significantly more intelligent after having a crayon removed from his brain. At first, he thrives, bonding with Lisa over science, making smart financial decisions, and understanding the world in ways he never could. But over time, he realizes that his newfound intelligence disconnects him from the people he loves. He cannot relate to his friends at Moe's anymore. His coworkers resent him, and he even starts alienating Marge and Lisa with his increasingly abstract or rational worldview. There is a gutting moment when Homer tells Lisa, "Being smart made me miserable." His intelligence makes him see things he previously ignored, like the cruelty or hypocrisy in the world, and it robs him of the comfort he once found in simple pleasures and relationships. Eventually, he chooses to have the crayon reinserted, trading intelligence for emotional belonging. The episode is not saying intelligence is bad, but it does capture something real. Being smart can be lonely, especially in environments that do not value or understand it. It can make jokes fall flat, create tension in relationships, or burden you with a kind of awareness that isolates you from others. That is a cost people do not always talk about. Story 49. I remember telling people a few years ago that Elon Musk is not the super genius everyone thinks he is. He either bought the business or hired a team to run his companies, and everyone called me an idiot for it. I was mocked for not understanding what a visionary he is. Story 50. Usually, it comes with laziness, lack of motivation, or social frustration. I rarely hear about intelligent people being more socially skilled or successful unless they are also psychopaths. Story 51. Finding the vast majority of people boring to hang out with, ending up living a secluded and lonely life. Knowing that a lack of a social life makes your brain age faster and shortens your life. Not feeling sad about it and, on the contrary, finding the thought quite soothing. Not sadness, acceptance. Story 52. Uninformed people fear you and treat you like the Spanish Inquisition. It is really frightening when large groups of uninformed people gather because they always behave like fearful animals backed into a corner. What they do not understand is dark arts. Story 53. My family wanted me to go to college. They were proud that I would be the first of my siblings to fully graduate with a bachelor's degree rather than an associate degree. They raved about the school I was going to. A solid state university, nothing extraordinary, surrounded by the red of rural Tennessee. It's surprising how suddenly my university is considered terrible and I am seen as blinded by the mainstream media, despite not consuming it, while my mother watches Newsmax, because I learned to be an independent thinker and broke away from the conservative bubble and organized religion. It's also very irritating knowing that many in my family hide behind religion and media to justify their beliefs and refuse to have those beliefs challenged. I was genuinely much happier when I was there, unaware of the world and how much beliefs like those I used to hold contributed to hurting others. It was easy to be ignorant. The shame that comes from seeing all that is going on breaks me often. Why would I want to live in a place surrounded by so many who fight against their own betterment? Story 54. If you are proud of yourself for the work you have done but people do not recognize it because they think it is free since you are intelligent. Story 55. I was forced to go on a mandatory team-building camping trip. I accounted for all tools we might need without being excessive. I brought an extra tarp, a spare camping gas bottle, extra pairs of socks in case someone fell in a river, and other small items. People could not understand that I had spent about 30 seconds thinking about what might be useful to have as a spare. Some people actually did not like me for considering their well-being in advance. Story 56. 1. Loneliness is a unique feeling when you experience it, even in the presence of your spouse and children. Being perceived as a know-it-all until you learn how to play dumb. Frustration that people do not see certain things that are obvious to you, and often you cannot be the one to help them understand. It happens to many people that someone who is not an expert in a subject you are expert in tries to ridicule your idea because they cannot see its benefits, and too many peers join them. Maybe you can find a way to explain it to them if given the chance. For someone in my position, it is often everyone joining in, not just some. You usually do not get a chance because it is unanimous in the room that you are the fool, so why would you deserve more time? You have to try to present things very differently, but it is difficult to gauge how low the expectations should be because setting them too low will offend people quickly. Story 57. Overthinking situations or anticipating events from a distance because you have analyzed them thoroughly is common. However, less intelligent individuals often dismiss your concerns until the events occur repeatedly. Usually, those who consider themselves intelligent are the least wise. Story 58. Everyone realizes that people with impairments have special needs, but fewer people understand that the opposite end of the spectrum involves a different set of concerns and issues. We rarely receive the help we need or even the necessary attention to these needs in many settings. It is common for bright people, especially children who have little influence over their social circles, to feel completely alone and disconnected from their social groups. Story 59. Having high intelligence and a very good memory made me perform poorly at school and was a hindrance in many aspects of life during my youth. I was successful at school growing up without much effort, which was a problem because I did not learn the value of hard work until later. I treated school as a game of getting good grades, which worked through high school. However, when I was in college, I procrastinated and underworked. I now understand that college is not a game of grades. It is an opportunity to learn, and you get out what you put in. Furthermore, after high school, it did not occur to me that being good at sports or any other activity was the result of work and showing up every day. I thought somehow that people are simply good at things or not, such as auto mechanics, lifting weights, or social skills. I decided in college to participate in something I was bad at. I joined a martial arts club, and just by showing up every day, I found that I improved. It was a total revelation. Story 60. Being unable to trust others to meet your standards in almost anything means if you want the job done right, you have to do it yourself. Story 61. Most of the time, there is no one around whom you can relate to. It is depressingly lonesome unless you find the right academic or work outlet. Story 62. 1. Understanding how much you do not actually know. The sad realization that intelligence does not equal financial opportunity. Story 63. Being the only person in a group to grasp the nuances of a situation and having to translate it into something simpler to help those around you. Story 64. I have no disdain for people who are not very smart. However, I detest people who think they are smart when they obviously are not. Story 65. No one wants to hear what you say. They think, oh, Miss Know-it-all is talking. How redundant. Story 66. Easily tired and experiencing random depression triggers. Constantly thinking and feeling the need to remain busy doing anything to keep the brain working. Having a hard time relaxing. Story 67. You have to constantly do the thinking for other people who then become reliant on you to fix every little problem, even when it is not your responsibility or desire to do so. This is often for someone who is too lazy to try solving things themselves. It becomes a never-ending cycle of frustration toward others, which causes you to develop a sarcastic and obviously frustrated attitude. They then incorrectly interpret this attitude as you being mean, rather than being mentally and emotionally worn out by them. Story 68. No matter how high other people's expectations are for you, your expectations are always higher, and you will never be able to live up to your own expectations. Or maybe that is just me. Story 69. Many situations feel like watching a train crash in slow motion. You know it is happening and why, but you cannot do anything about it. Story 70. Listening to people speak nonsense when you do not have the energy to correct them. Usually right-wing individuals or basic racists. Story 71. I have heard it described this way. The average intelligence quotient is 100, and an intelligence quotient around 80 is considered mentally handicapped. So if you have an intelligence quotient of 120, that difference is the functional equivalent of nearly everyone you interact with being mentally handicapped. It can be hard to make connections with people, and when you discuss it, you may come across as arrogant, appearing to think you are smarter than everyone else. Fortunately, intelligence quotient is an imperfect measure, and there are many different kinds of intelligence. I try to focus on the ways other people perform at a higher level than I do and learn from their strengths. Still, sometimes it is hard to connect. Story 72. Realizing just how difficult everything is because there are far more uninformed people, and they elect leaders who are equally uninformed to run everything. Story 73. Having to convince others that an idea was theirs helps to gain better support toward the final outcome. Sometimes I wish people would listen without needing to be coddled. I thought moving to upper management would improve this, but it still seems more effective to convince rather than to tell. Story 74. It is hard to sleep. The brain is always writing, creating, organizing, overanalyzing, or planning something. Story 75. Some people act weirdly competitive and insecure if they believe you are smart. If they find something you do not know much about, they try to rub it in your face, saying things like, "I thought you were supposed to be smart, ha ha ha," even if they do not know what they are talking about. This especially applies to people who have reputations for being unintelligent. For context, no, I do not go around bragging about how smart I think I am. I just know how to do my job and have always been a good student. I have definitely met people, usually men, who are excited to be condescending toward a girl like me. Story 76. You predict how things might go, and no one believes you every time. Then it goes that way and it is too late. Story 77. Overthinking and underestimating your own self-worth comes with the territory. It erodes your confidence and your ability to utilize your gifts. I often put off doing something because I don't know if I will do well, but then I finally try and always do better than I expect. Story 78. When you connect the dots so far ahead, no one believes you. It is somewhat absurd how short-sighted most people are. Story 79. Not speaking up or committing to something just in case you are not 100% right. That is what I am told, of course. I do not consider myself smart, though. Story 80. The depression and negativity. I am often called negative, but I am simply aware and statistically informed. I stay up to date on events and scientific findings. As a scientist with an understanding of statistics, I work with math and research the truth every day. When I read numbers, I understand their magnitude and comparisons very well. I am not negative. I just understand things. I am often alone in this, outside of my scientific community. Story 81. You accumulate experience and certifications that others talk about, like their favorite podcaster who thinks the president is a closet liberal. Story 82. There are no downsides to being intelligent. This discussion is simply people complaining that their knowledge is not valued in society as much as they expected. Story 83. As a child, it can be very socially isolating. I read books that were grade levels above my peers, exposing me to concepts and themes far beyond what they were thinking and experiencing. I remember reading the autobiography of Charles Darwin in elementary school and being fascinated by the concept of evolution. I wanted to talk to everyone about it. My classmates were reading Junie B. Jones, and no one wanted to listen to me talk about monkeys or birds. I didn't have much in common with my peers. My parents kept the TV tuned to the Discovery or History Channel, so I wasn't familiar with the latest Disney movie or cartoon, and I generally didn't care to be. Those things seemed childish to me and far less interesting than aliens building the pyramids or documentaries about meerkats. I grew up quickly, praised for being mature or an old soul. My mom likes to tell people that I was never young, just little, to describe what I was like as a child. I saw people my own age as kids or babies, so I had very few friends growing up. Story 84. having to wait while others are still reading or trying to process the information to the conclusion you reached several minutes ago. Banging your head on the desk while others discuss possibilities or options that are usually irrelevant or unrelated to the problem at hand. Putting up with unhelpful answers to basic questions even though you already have the information readily available. Story 85. Having to read to Reddit users talking as if they were intelligent. An intelligent person does not consider themselves smart because there is always so much to learn and so much they do not know. How can you be smart if you ignore so much? Story 86. It is just so lonely. I read many interesting and wonderful books last year, and people dislike you for trying to bring any of it up. Everything that is not a vibes builder is a vibes killer, and any conversation that goes beyond the mundane is considered the latter. Here is the thing. I do not want to lecture anyone on these matters. I do not want to start a monologue about my unique interests while I have an audience. I want an active discussion, to engage with ideas and opinions that are also interesting and perhaps even contradictory to my own. But a monologue is often the best-case scenario I have found, and it is rarely satisfying. I make concerted attempts to connect ideas and topics I am interested in to the mundane, and when it works, great. But often it is impossible to get people to talk about what I will call meaningful subject matter. Why not, though? Why must we strive for the lowest common denominator in everything? Television, food, and sports must make up a large percentage of American conversation. The other parts are work and politics, but not interesting politics. People just rehash something they read, other people agree, then share opinions they read somewhere, and then move on. People are just reading from the prompter, and if you go off course, they do not know how to respond except to hope you move off the subject quickly onto more settled ground. Story 87. Having to deal with other intelligent people who are full of themselves about their intelligence, sometimes speaking condescendingly to people who are actually more intelligent than they are, but are so full of themselves that they do not realize it. Story 88. It is annoying. I don't personally think I am smart, but a lot of people say I am, and it almost drives me insane how others just don't understand things the way I do. Story 89. In my opinion, it correlates with cynicism, existentialism, and possibly some nihilism. This can manifest as depression, as several others have mentioned, but there are other outlets as well, including adrenaline-seeking, addiction, extreme apathy, loneliness, and possibly some sociopathy. Story 90. Stopping thinking can be hard. When left alone with your thoughts long enough, you spiral into negative ruminations. Story 91. People think you are rude for knowing more than they do, and people stop trusting you because they believe you cannot know that much. Story 92. Not being able to have normal conversations with people. In my case, I look bored out of my mind most of the time because I am thinking too fast. Over the years, I have gotten better at fitting in, but I still have issues when people drag out a conversation because they cannot express a point concisely. In school, I was bored out of my mind in most classes. Lately, I have been ignoring the urge to call out stupidity when people read a one-paragraph internet post and claim that they suddenly know more than experts who have spent their lives researching a topic. For example, the anti-vaccine crowd. I have lost friends because I called them stupid and ignorant to their faces after they insisted that vaccines cause autism. Story 93. It means knowing you do not know everything and having a lack of confidence in your abilities because you understand how easily you can falter. Less intelligent people are often much more confident by comparison. This also extends to accountability and guilt complexes. Story 94. A downside of appearing smart is that people will expect you to have automatic competence in everything, regardless of your familiarity with the task, and treat you more harshly when you fail to meet their expectations. You also have the issue that people do not understand that you are still subject to a lifetime of social conditioning, which might prevent you from behaving as independently as they expect. Story 95. Some very smart people lack basic knowledge and social skills. Of course, this applies only to some. The truly smart people are those who have a high intelligence quotient, are humble, and have great people skills, in my humble opinion. Story 96. I don't know how smart I am, but people often refer to me as intelligent. My biggest struggle is overthinking and overanalyzing. Sometimes I would love just to do things without trying to predict outcomes. That said, I also think it's an advantage when interacting with others because I try to see what someone is good at and understand what they do. The truth is, most people are actually quite skilled at what they enjoy, and it's fun to learn from that. It makes interactions enjoyable. When people say things like, others don't get your jokes, or you're surrounded by idiots, don't be arrogant. Maybe you're just not funny. Story 97. Smart people who think they are smarter than everyone. I had to adjust the attitude of a young person living in a basement over an unnecessary smart comment. My post was about the negative content on Facebook. He proved my point that Reddit is not immune to it either. Story 98. I like to think that if you are intelligent, you have more empathy. Empathy for your planet and the people who live here. It must be difficult to watch injustice happening to our world and its people and not have the ability to change things. Story 99. It is easy to accidentally come across as condescending. People tend to become defensive when you explain something in sufficient depth. Story 100. You see things that others do not see, and you can make connections others do not make. It is actually depressing, but I still would not trade it for being unaware. Story 101. Being around people who are smart enough to know they are intelligent but not smart enough to recognize their own limitations. They have arrogance about them, and if they know something you do not, they act superior. However, if you speak to them in the same way, they become angry. Story 102. Mental health. It is not scientifically proven, but in my experience, the more intelligent you are, the more ghosts you will find in your head. Story 103. Rephrasing a sentence because no one understands what I am saying. Communication is difficult sometimes. Story 104. If you are an older woman, you have to be careful when first dating. As soon as a date commented, "You were smart," I knew it was over. They do not like too smart. Story 105. When I tell someone something that turns out to be incorrect and realize it later, I think about it a lot, even if it is a minor mistake. Story 106. Depends on what you mean by smart. The smarter you are, the dumber you feel because the more things you know, the more you realize there are huge amounts of things you don't know. It's kind of paradoxical, I guess. There may be a point where you're so smart you no longer feel dumb, but I'm not smart enough for that, so I don't know, which makes me feel dumb. The only reason I suspect I might be smart is because other people say I am, and I have a technical job that I seem to be good at. But it's hard to really say. When I was in rehabilitation, one of the common coping thoughts was, addicts are smarter than normal people, which is why we are addicts, because smart people are often sad and self-medicate. All I could think was, if I'm so smart, why would I be dumb enough to get addicted to something I knew was highly addictive? Story 107. Realizing that all of this is most likely just chaotic nonsense with no reason behind it. Realizing that humanity continues to eat its own tail in a never-ending cycle of making things better so that a few people can make everything worse. It is a pessimistic view, but I cannot see the point of any of this anymore. Story 108. Loneliness by far. The folly of having knowledge is not being able to share it with those who do not have it. Story 109. The awareness of unintelligent people, how unaware they are, and how many of them exist in the world hurts my brain. I actively try to avoid them in every situation, but it is impossible. Story 110. My brain does not shut off. There is nothing worse than starting to plan tomorrow's schedule in your head in the middle of being intimate. My wife says I have horrible attention deficit disorder. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.